Now, today we're going to talk about something that is very, very troubling regarding the U.S. postal system. Now, there's something about Egypt that very few people know and understand. Egypt never fell, you guys. Do you ever wonder why your physical home address is required to receive benefits? Well, we're going to explain all that to you in today's show. This is the Postmaster General here. I pulled up the Wikipedia page for the Postmaster General of the United States. And the Postmaster has a salary of $276,840 and is only second in income to the President of the United States. This is the highest paid government employee underneath the President of the United States. So you have to ask yourself, why is that? Well, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into your address, both your physical home address as well as your internet address, and what all of that really means and where it came from, the roots of all of this. Now, I looked up the post office, and what I found was that it actually predates the Constitution of the United States and the Declaration of Independence. So the United States Post Office is a very important entity in the history of America. Now, Ben Franklin was the very first postmaster general, and there's something about this address, and I'm going to tell you what I think it is. You see, this here is the Sphinx. Let me pull this up here. And the Sphinx is called the headdress, which of course contains the word address. And I believe that we've gotten it down to the bottom of what exactly the Sphinx headdress means in relationship to the post offices. Now, just a quick recap. We talked about how the post office buildings in Dallas, Texas, as well as at Grounds, New York, are shaped like a sphinx. Let's pull up a couple pictures of this really quickly. Now, these post offices in these two cities exist in an orientation laid out like Giza. There are 3 buildings laid out like the Belt of Orion, like the 3 pyramids in Egypt, in very close proximity to these post offices. And the post offices, as I've shown in previous videos, exist in the exact spot where the Sphinx of Egypt would be in relationship to its 3 pyramids. So we have an overlay. We have a perfect overlay of what is going on. Now, why is this important? Why are we talking about this? Because we are beginning to uncover exactly what these post offices and their relationships to the Sphinx may be. And I believe that the Sphinx headdress is in fact the address, and that all this points back to the posts, the doorposts, post office, doorpost, of the Hebrews, Israelites that were in bondage in Egypt. And now they had to mark their doorposts to account for the Passover, so that the Lord would pass over their houses and not kill their children only if they observed the rules of the Lord, in anticipation of the mass exodus out of Egypt. Let's take a look at Dallas post office. But what you're going to see here is that this post office is laid out like the Sphinx, and we have the 3 pyramids in Egypt as well. Here's the post office here. As you can see, this is it here. Zoom in on it. It is laid out like the Sphinx with the 2 arms coming out and the headdress, the address. These 2 buildings are the 2 towers This third building is a communications building laid out like a pyramid. This is your belt of Orion. And this is the Sphinx, laid out in a similar fashion to Giza. Now we go to the World Trade Center and look at its post office. Here again, the belt of Orion, the two empty twin towers, the new Freedom Tower, and again in the same location as the other post office, we have another post office that also looks like a rudimentary form of the Sphinx headdress of Egypt. This head portion of the Sphinx is in fact called a headdress. Here's the history.com, and they describe the pharaoh headdress and the Great Sphinx. This is widely known. Again, headdress contains the word address. So is this an accident? No. Now, we're going to look at early American history. Now, you'll notice this is called what is called a wig. And it's called a judicial wig, and it's worn by barristers, which were basically lawyers in early history. Okay? And this all occurred during the founding of America. Now, there are other countries that share these wigs, okay, like England. But you have to remember that America really is and was an English colony. And I believe we're still under the crown as well. It's just that they don't say it. But really, we were never free. It was all just a big lie. Okay? And so you'll notice the similarities between the wig of these barristers or lawyers compared to this images of the Sphinx. Now, I was not expecting to see this, but yet here it is. Look at the horizontal lines radiating across the bottom portion of the actual headdress, matching up with the images of the barrister. Look at the general shape as it falls across the shoulders. You can see this definitely looks like the inspiration for this particular wig came from the headdress of the Sphinx. So now you have to ask yourself, why?
Universe surround when you're ready to wait for us to leave this earth. Come on, they're calling the name. Don't know. I could stay or leave off the way, 'cause the comet can take us all the way through. To see everything looks the same. I don't know if change was right, 'cause the craven remains.
the oldest postal system in the world goes back to ancient Egypt. I pulled up this article here called EgyptianStreets.com, and they describe the ancient postal system and that the pharaohs used letters to communicate with one another. And they would send these letters on like boxes, and they would float it down the Nile. And they would get updates on political developments. Here it says, ancient Egyptians developed a postal service that dates back to 2000 BC, the oldest postal system in the world. The main mode of transportation was through the Nile River. The letters were placed in a box, escorted by guards. At the time, postal services were exclusive to the pharaohs. The Postal Museum displays messaged between Amenhotep and Akhenaten, where they would update each other on political developments. As the method of transportation developed, so did the post delivery service. Ptolemaic era, 305 BC, a new method of transportation was introduced. Carriers would deliver messages with the help of horses. Now you know why a horse is shown on the United States Postal Service and the postmaster. They show these horses, and they use horses to deliver letters. This was all inspired by the ancient Egyptians. They even use the same terms as express mail and regular mail. These are terms used for shipping and mail and the mail service. Now, let's keep going with this. The word post comes from the general shape of an ancient door called the post and lintel. This is what it looks like here. It's basically 3 pieces of wood. Okay, you have 2 posts and that hold up a lintel, right? Now, we're going to look at something amazing, because here is another image of a simple post and lintel made out of blocks of wood. And when you take a look at the United States Postal Service logo, you can actually see the post and lintel encoded within the logo by flipping it 90 degrees. Now, why wouldn't they just make the logo like this so you could understand what you're looking at? Instead, they flip everything around, and you can clearly see 2 posts and a lintel for those with eyes to see. So, now you see what they were really depicting. Now, this goes all the way back to the 10 plagues and the exodus of God's chosen people from Egypt. The last of the 10 plagues was the death of the Pharaoh's firstborn. And if you remember the story, the Hebrew slaves were instructed to swipe the blood of the lamb on the post of their doors, just like this. In fact, they were told to swipe it on the post and the lintel, the scripture reads. And if they did this, they would be passed over by the angel of death. In other words, they had to be postmarked, which is the term used by the United States Postal Service. Everything is postmarked. Do you see the play on words? So, there's the post and lintel here on the U.S. Postal Service logo, except it's not postmarked on the post or the lintel. There's no mark. The mark you see here is marked on the ground at the entrance of the door. Now, this is mockery at its finest, because if they wanted to depict themselves as something spiritual or holy, and there was no nefarious, occult meaning to this logo, they would have put a mark on the post and the lintel, right? Like put a dot here and maybe a dot over here. But instead, There is no mark. And they just show this mark in the doorway on the ground, as if to defy the Most High. Now, this Exodus was the very first Passover. It was the foreshadowing of another lamb who would give his blood for entrance into heaven through the door. And if your post was marked, you will be spared through the Son of God, Yeshua the Christ. Do you see how everything in the Old Testament was pointing towards Jesus? And so I will repeat this because this is important. People that are walking around telling you that the God of the Old Testament, the God that delivered the Hebrew Israelites from Egypt, was the devil, they're completely wrong. There are at least 10 or 20 stories of things that point forward from the Old Testament to Jesus that are attached to the story of the Israelites, the Hebrew Israelites, and Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament. So you can't have one without the other. By trying to accept that the God of the Old Testament was evil, you reject Christ. That's one and the same. You throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, this is amazing because these are truths that were hiding in plain sight and had not been discovered until we found this on this channel. No one else really found this. Now, we discovered this a while ago. I'd covered this a while back, but I wanted to cover it again. We're in the season where everyone's sending letters, and I'm not telling you that sending letters is evil. What I'm trying to show you is that America is Egypt. We are all still Egyptian slaves. We're imprisoned by our addresses, which postmark our location so that taxes, fees, bills, infractions, liens, tickets, fines, all of that stuff can be imposed on you and enslave you. And we all work for the Pharaoh, the president, and the postmaster general, the two highest paid government officials. So, the husband decides that he's going to go ahead and work with the aliens and try to infiltrate the resistance. Now, it's interesting because we've did some research on the post office and the headdress of the Sphinx, and comparing the Sphinx to the actual shape of the buildings of some of these post offices, specifically in Dallas, Texas, and New York City, in relation to three buildings that look like the three pyramids at Giza. And so this is very real, you guys, because in this film, or in this TV series, the post office is where this stuff takes place, is the headquarters of the aliens. I guess you can call it undercover group that's trying to find the resistance. All takes place in this post office. Here you see postmaster plastered across this the door, the glass door, as he enters into the postmaster's office. And before this, he goes in and he actually, you see him walking about in the post office. You see the background of the post office here, the safety deposit boxes. You see murals on the wall. These are all parts of this post office. So here it is here. Here's the front of the post office, and this is the group that is responsible to find the resistance. And now we go to the Bible, because this is where things get amazing. Exodus 12. And God talks about instructions for the Israelites. He said, "And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Speak ye unto the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers." Now this is interesting, because the Hebrew New Year was 9/11. The Hebrew New Year was 9/11 in 6 BC. That is the day that the Hebrew New Year fell on. And this is talking about the beginning of the months of the year. before God gives instructions to the Hebrews. And he says, if your household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next in unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your account for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male the first year. You shall take it from the sheep or from the goats. And I believe that this lamb represented the Lamb of Christ to come in the Passover, the future Passover that Christ would tell us to do in remembrance of him. And ye shall keep it up unto the 14th day of the same month, in the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening, and they should take it of the blood and strike it on the two side posts, the post office, and on the upper door posts of the house. And they shall eat the flesh of the night, roast with fire on unleavened bread, and the blood. This is my body, and this is my blood. This was the first Passover. And with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire his head with his legs, with the pureness thereof. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remaineth of it unto the morning ye shall burn with fire. And thus ye shall eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on, and your feet, and your staff in your hand. And ye shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses for which you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague should not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and you shall keep it a feast of the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast of the ordinance forever. He talks about the 7 days and the passing over. And it shall come to pass when your children shall say unto you, what mean ye by this service, postal service, that ye shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses, delivered the male. And the people bowed the head and worshipped. And the children of Israel went away and did as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. And he called for Moses and Aaron by night, and said, rise up and get you forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go serve the Lord, as you have said. Also take your flocks and your herds, and be gone, and bless me also. And the Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste. For they said, we be all dead men. And the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading troughs being bound up in the clothes upon their shoulders. And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses, and they borrowed of the Egyptians jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment. This is why we have a post office. Do you have the address of life, or do you have the address of death? Will the Lord pass over your house? Is your post, the posts of your door, marked with the blood of the Lamb? And here we gain more clues as the Israelites journeyed out of Egypt because of the judgment that God had enacted upon the Egyptians of the doorposts and the firstborn of the Egyptians being killed. And as they journeyed out from Ramses to Sukkoth, about 600,000 on foot, there were men and women. They went out, a mixed multitude of them in their flocks and herds, and they baked unleavened cakes. And now, as we look at the alignment of the great pyramids, Here it is, here. It is pointing at 42 degrees. And where are the Great Pyramids pointing to as they frame the Nile Delta perfectly on this eastern side? Where is the Great Pyramid pointing to? Where are the pyramids pointing to? They're pointing to the route after the Israelites left Egypt, the route from Ramses to Succoth, as we just read in the Bible. It is pointing to the route of the first Exodus after the postman came and enacted judgment, the holy postman delivering the mail of judgment, mail meaning mal or bad. So now you know the truth. For everything that God does that is good, there's an evil equal counterpart. And now we see that the pyramids are pointing to the route of the Exodus between Ramses and Succoth. Now this is the Exodus route here. And now you're probably wondering where the Sphinx is pointing to. And this is where things get interesting. Because the Sphinx, as we see here, is aligned to the cardinal points. It is aligned to roughly 90 degrees. And when we draw a line out 90 degrees from the Sphinx, an amazing thing happens. This is the Sphinx. We're going to carry this line out 90 degrees and see where this line points. And of course, the final Exodus culminated in the crossing of the Red Sea. And of course, this is the Red Sea here, the tip of it. This entire portion here is the Red Sea, and the 90-degree angle of where the Sphinx is looking to. The headdress Sphinx with the address. The address of the headdress is pointing to the very tip of the Red Sea. The same Red Sea that the Israelites would cross into the Holy Land. And now you know the truth. And then in another amazing revelation, as after God has explained to the Israelites that he delivered them out of the land of Egypt, he talks about a memorial between thine eyes, that the Lord's law may be in thy mouth, for with a strong hand hath the Lord brought thee out of Egypt, between their eyes. And he also talks about keeping ordinances, and that he shall set apart unto the Lord all that open the matrix, and every firstling that cometh of a beast which thou hast, which is birth, the males shall be the Lord's. Sanctify unto me all the firstborn, whatsoever openeth the womb. Open the matrix among the children of Israel, both of man and beast. It is mine, man and beast. Thou shalt set apart unto the Lord all that openeth the matrix, and every firstling that cometh of a beast which thou hast, the males shall be the Lord's. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh would hardly let us go, that the Lord slew all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast, Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all that openeth the matrix, being males, but all the firstborn of my children I redeem. And it shall be for a token upon thine hand, and for frontlets between thine eyes. For by strength of the hand of the Lord brought us forth out of Egypt. And we told you in previous videos how the parting of the Red Sea is an analogy of the hyaloid canal parting through the vitreous humor of the eye. And here we get more details about the eyes and the single eye between thine eyes. And this, I believe, is the bottom of the mystery of the Sphinx. This is the post and lintel, the lintel being the top portion of the door, which God said to mark the blood of the lamb on the lintel. And here it is in detail. Take care and be safe, you guys. This is Jon Postel. Now, it's interesting because his name sounds like postal, and that is no accident, I believe. In fact, I'm going to show you later in one of his eulogies that was circulated around the internet, where they mentioned the Sphinx itself and said that Jon Postel could stare down a Sphinx. There's no accident as to why they would put that in this man's eulogy, one of the most popular eulogies ever published online, the man who basically established the internet. Now, let's read about him and see exactly what he did. It says here, Jonathan Bruce was an American computer scientist who made many significant contributions to the development of the internet. Now, they're putting this lightly because it's actually far more. He was called the god of the internet, particularly with respect to standards. He is known principally for being the editor of the Request for Comment document series and for administering the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. Okay, what these are the internet numbers. It is a 3 numbers with a dot, another 3 numbers, another 3 numbers. It is basically the internet address that links into the alphanumeric address. So you have the numeric address, and then you have, like enterthestars.com. And the technology that he came up with linked the two of those together, linked your IP address with your physical address. So is this all starting to make sense? And it's weird how all this is fitting into everything we've been talking about addresses. As above, so below. The internet web above with the addresses in hyperspace, and the addresses below here on Earth, your door address and your home address, and how all that fits back into the Exodus and having the correct address on your doorpost in order to live. Do you have the blood of the lamb on your doorpost, or do you have no address or the wrong address of death? That is the question. So back to Postal. In his lifetime, he was known as the god of the internet for his comprehensive influence on the medium. The Internet Society's Postal Wars named in his honor as the Postal Center at Information Scientists Institute, University of Southern California. His obituary was written by Vint Cerf and published, and this is what we're going to review. This obituary is simply unbelievable. And they mention the Sphinx. Why the Sphinx? Because the Sphinx is the headdress. That is what it's called. And the Sphinx actually points to the tip of the Red Sea, where Pharaoh would make his last stand. The Red Sea was parted, and the Israelites escaped. The pyramids, the Great Pyramids of Egypt, the 3 pyramids, when you draw a line through them, they line up to where the Exodus began. So you see, Giza is laid out in a fashion that memorializes the Exodus from Egypt of the Hebrew Israelites, from Ramses to Sukkoth. That's where the first leg of the Exodus began. Now, I'm not sure if Postel was, aware of this. It is definitely bizarre that he has this name. I don't know if this was a given name to him. I'm not sure the level of psyop, you guys. This could even all be manifesting on a spiritual level, and those of you that come to this channel understand that. some of this stuff is beyond the human imagination. It's beyond the human capability, almost intellectually, to process all this information. Jon got into some trouble. This is his career. He was a very smart individual. He wrote all this code, Internet Protocol Suite. He was on the Internet Architecture Board, basically building the framework of the early Internet, starting in 1969. He did a root authority test. This is where he got into trouble. He emailed 8 of the 12 operations of Internet's regional root name servers. There was 12 at the time. And don't you think that's interesting? We talked about the 12 intracranial nerves being the basis of all of your senses coming in through your body, come in through the 12 cranial nerves. There are 2 pairs, each side of your brain. And that's how the internet started too. There were 12 bases. We're going to get into that a little bit later too. On his own authority, and because he was the god of the internet at the time, everyone listened to him. He emailed these people, instructed them to change the root zone server from the SAIC subsidiary Network Solutions to a different network. So basically, he redirected the internet. Now, this is huge. This represents a huge amount of power. Not just anybody with any amount of knowledge would even know how to do this. The operators complied with Postal's instructions, thus dividing control of the internet. Now, at this time, Postal was working for the government. He was a government contractor. And they got really upset that he did this. And he got in a lot of trouble. Now, this was under the Clinton administration. And I believe this man may have been another victim of the Clinton regime, because he did die shortly after this happened, actually within 9 months. It says he died of complications from heart surgery 9 months after the incident, and for replacing a leaky heart valve. And I just don't know if I buy it. Now let's get into this, the details of this incident. Here's an article. It says PAB Internet Reconfiguration Concerns Federal Officials. University of Southern California researcher this week took the unusual step of that's Postal, of rerouting many internet address queries to a computer he runs under a Pentagon contract, instead of letting them go to the government-sponsored central facility in Herndon that usually handles the traffic. Without notifying the federal agencies that supervise the internet, researcher Jon Postel, widely known as the father of the internet, addressing systems. The addressing system. Address. Postal address. Reconfigured at least half of the internet's 12 key directory information computers to get their data exclusively from his computer instead of the Herndon Center, is what he did, which possessed the one authoritative worldwide list of internet addresses. So this was the one worldwide list of internet addresses. Although Postal, who runs Internet Assigned Numbers Authority at USC, has told officials that the reconfiguration was just a test, some government officials and industry sources said it occurred at a highly surprising time. Internet community leaders affiliated with Postal spent the week embroiled in tense negotiations with the Clinton administration over the government's future role in controlling some of the network's key operating functions. So all the way back then, the government was talking about controlling some of the network's key operating functions. Now, this gets even more bizarre, because the administration released a report yesterday calling for the internet's most crucial operations to be transferred from federal research agencies to the private sector over the next 2 years. Some computer user groups, including those affiliated with POSTAL, urged the government to end its oversight of the network sooner. So they were talking about the internet's most crucial functions being transferred from federal research agencies to private sector over the next 2 years. They were talking about handing over the internet back to the private sector and away from the government's hands. And this is the time that Postal did the stunt and shifted and redirected these directories back to his own computer. The government got upset. Says Postel did not return phone calls seeking comment yesterday, but in the statement he said the reconfiguration would result in no change to the data in the directory information computers called root servers. He said that once this test is completed, the servers will revert to the previous arrangements. Although the incident did not appear to hamper the ability of people to access information on the internet this week, it highlights the ad hoc nature of how some of the network's most important operating functions are handled. So they're trying to basically make this sound like a big deal and kind of siding with the government in this article and basically showing and characterizing Postel as like a rogue agent, um, someone who is dangerous, who has too much power and could single-handedly bring down the internet, when in actuality, all he was doing was trying to hand it back over to the private citizens. And this is unbelievable because I believe that we just found the basis by which the entire internet was designed. This is ancient Egypt, and this is the goddess Neith. But her name is also Net, like the internet. And she was the ancient Egyptian goddess of spiders and weaving and the loom, just like the internet. In fact, she was considered the priestess who opens the good pathways. We know when there's a web address or a file, there is a path to that file. And this is all about the web address as well as your physical address. This is how they maintain control. Now here's where things get very interesting because they talk about her being the feminine of Wepwawet, WWW. Wepwawet we've talked a lot about because he was the jackal god, and we compared him to Obama. He is the god of war. And Obama said, we will rebuild, we will come back stronger, we will remember. He put that on the 114th or 104th floor of the new Freedom Tower. He wrote that on a beam. And when you take Wepwawet's symbol, have him on a skyboat, and you flip it upside down, it looks exactly like Obama's signature. And now we have a direct link to this mother of the web, this goddess of the web, because she is the doublet of Wepwawet. Here they showed again the main imagery of Neith as WPW3WT. That's Wepwawet, was as deity of the unseen and limitless sky. Net also represented the vault of the entire sky, the entire ecliptic of the sky. That was how she was personified. And that fits right into the World Wide Web. It's the World Wide Web. And that is what she represented. I believe that they borrowed or copied all of the elements from Wepwawet and Neith so that they could develop the paradigm for the World Wide Web. We previously talked about APEP and Ra, and I told you that Wepwawet was Ra. Now we're being told here that Net is the mother of Ra. But here is the crazy part. We covered APEP, and I told you that APEP sounded like app, like a phone app. So now we're getting all of this overlay of this mythology from ancient Egypt to our modern times that nobody's aware of. We went on to show you that the APEP was the snake eating its tail. That is the personification of APEP, and it's basically taking up all your time And that's exactly what these apps do. Everything in life is an app now, it seems. The way they maintain control of you is with your physical address. And now they have your material address, which is your home address, and they also have their version of your spiritual address, which is their World Wide Web, the ether. Now, Neith was said to reweave the world on her loom daily. A loom is used to make a web of fibers like carpets and sheets and things like that. And so now you see all the juxtapositions of the internet. Now, what the other thing is that they show her with this cobra of Wadjet. It's right here on the center of her pineal gland. What does this mean? What it really means is they want to control your pineal with darkness instead of the light. Christ said the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is single, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is dark, your whole body will be full of darkness. You don't believe me? She also carried the Ankh. The Ankh is representative of the thoracic vertebrae of your spine. And it is representative of the thoracic vertebrae of your spine, as it says right here. Some of these gods and goddesses also carried the Jed, D-J-E-D-D, which represented the sacrum of your spine. This is all about Kundalini and the serpents rising up through your spine and into your pineal gland. This is being full of darkness. This is not good. And the Clinton administration could not allow this to happen. And he wanted to make a statement. And this man ended up dead 9 months later. Says the Clinton administration intends to change that by having a not-for-profit corporation starting later this year supervise the root server system and upgrade many of the machines. And that ended up not happening. Defense Department handled this. It says here, network solutions, we're going to get into that. There were 12 secondary root servers spread around the world that are supposed to get their information from a main root server, which is operated for the government by Network Solutions Incorporated. These are the people, Network Solutions Incorporated, who basically handle all of the addresses. Now, this all links back into ICANN as well, and we'll get into that as well. Because basically, Network Solutions, by the end of this whole journey, becomes ICANN. Now, ICANN manages the addresses for the internet, but what else they do is pay-per-click management. Now, all of these companies that are on the web, CNN, Fox News, they get hundreds of thousands of views per day. They are making money on their websites. They're making millions of dollars just from internet traffic. And they, I believe, are in bed with these kinds of companies that manage this pay-per-click and these addresses. And what happens is that free speech is stifled because the simple person who does not get the traffic or doesn't have the means to get the traffic, and if they do get the traffic is then diluted, minimized. I've seen this personally myself with not only my YouTube channel, but the news outlets that I post content on, where the views are intentionally subdued and minimized for a certain subject matter, okay? And that is the bold truth. Now, this is Network Solutions, and I just told you what they do. They manage the pay-per-click market. Here is the series of buyouts over the years. And this is the description of their business. Network Solutions first operated the domain name system registry under the subcontract with the U.S. Defense Information Systems Agency, as a government, in 1991. NISI gave out names in .com, .org, .mil, .gov. These are all of the names that we recognize, along with free internet protocol address blocks. This work was performed at the channeler offices of GSI, the primary contractor, a corporation formed by Infonet to avoid foreign ownership of U.S. government contracts. So they said that they took control so that the foreign governments could not gain control of the internet. That's the excuse of why they said that they needed to control it. In 1992, NSI was the sole bidder on a grant for the National Science Foundation to further develop the domain name registration service for the internet. In 1993, it was granted an exclusive contract by the National Science Foundation to be the sole domain registrar. Okay, who is the sole domain registrar now? ICANN. We're going to get to that. But in the beginning, in the 90s, when the internet was taking off, it was Network Solutions. Now, this goes on because it says here, NSI also maintained the central database of assigned names called Who Is. Contract was given to Boeing to operate the MIL registry. They had authority to charge for domain name registrations in 1995. This was 3 years before Postal was killed or died. So you can see why Postal was arguing to have the internet turned back over to private hands, which would have resulted in us not being charged for the internet. Network Solutions charged $100 for 2 years registration. This was a lot of money in 1995. The fee was imposed on all domains. So think about this. All of the existing websites, they had this big inflow of cash, millions of dollars coming in because they were able to charge. 30% of this revenue went to the NSF to create an Internet Intellectual Infrastructure Fund. In 1997, a lawsuit was filed charging Network Solutions with antitrust violations with regard to domain names. The 30% of the registration fee that went to the NSF. So they got in a little bit of trouble. They reduced the domain name registration fee to $70, so $30 off. And all of a sudden, here comes the censorship. They were doing this in the 90s. Solutions implemented a policy of censoring domain names. This came to light when Jeff Gold attempted to register the domain name shiitakesmushrooms.com because it has the word shit in it. Now, here's the problem. Shit.com had already been registered, so why wouldn't they let him register shiitake mushrooms, which is a real mushroom? Further aggravating the controversy was Network Solutions' automated screens blocked the registration of shiitakemushrooms.com, though the domain name shit.com had already been successfully registered. Network Solutions argued that it was within its First Amendment rights to block words it found offensive. So you see how this works now. They could block you and not even give you a reason for blocking you. Now it's you against a multi-billion-dollar corporation with all of its lawyers and everything else. Network Solutions' $100 charge, which many parties believe was excessive, in addition to its monopoly position in the market, was one of the contributing pressures that resulted in the creation of the International Ad Hoc Committee, which is basically controlled opposition, in its failed attempt to take over the domain name system. So then it goes on into the U.S. Department of Commerce, NTIA releasing the white paper and ultimately contracting with the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, ICANN, to administer the DNS. And now you know the entire story. Full circle with Bill Clinton at the beginning of this journey. And here we are now at the end of the Obama presidency with ICANN managing again all of the domain names. Yes, he said I can, which is thank you, Satan, backwards. And in the end of it, he got the last laugh because ICANN ended up controlling the world's internet and all the domain names. With the formation of ICANN in 1998, see, this started in the year that he died. The year that Postal died, ICANN started. That's not a coincidence. The domain name industry opened up to a partial competition with NSI retaining its monopoly on .com, .net, and .org, but having to reorganize or recognize a separation of registry, which manages the underlying database of domain names and registrar, which acts as the retail provider of domain names. To achieve this separation, NSI created a firewall between the two divisions of business. So this goes on. By the end of 1999, the fee for registration had been reduced from $34.99 to a wholesale rate of $6 per year to registered resellers. And the reason why they were able to drop the rates is because they handle all the pay-per-click business as well. So they were simply shifted. They moved the shells around. It's a shell game. They're making plenty of money on other things. In August 2009, Network Solutions notified customers that its secure servers were breached. It led to the exposure of names, address, and credit card numbers of 500,000 people who made purchases on websites hosted by the company. So there you go. So they don't even keep your finances safe. This was in 2009. They said, we feel really terrible about this. So this is the story behind this. These companies are closely linked into the national government. They have your data. They will subdue and subvert any real truth. Those channels and outlets get pushed to the bottom. They are choked out by financial means, which is why when you see some of these struggling channels that have been going for years and years and years with not that many subscribers, you know that they're there for the right reason. You know they're there for the right reason because you can see they're not making any amount of money. It's the giant channels are the ones you need to be concerned with, that the gates have been opened for, because the government ultimately controls the gate. They are the gatekeepers through these domain names and through the tactics that they use through these servers. And this gets on into a very complicated level that is way above my pay grade to understand the ins and outs. But you can believe that there are stopgap measures in place to prevent truth from rising to the top and going mainstream. And that's just the bottom line, you guys. So this goes on. There were some controversies. Publishing non-public information. What else do we have here? And you wonder how do some of these servers get away with publishing pornography, for instance, which is easily accessible on the internet, as many of you know. But yet, when it comes to truth, it's censored. It's literally censored, as if it were some kind of pornographic thing that should not be seen by everyone else because they don't want the truth to get out. Here's another controversy. Weblock service sent an email to customers stating the company would be automatically enrolling customers in a new security program called Weblock with an initial charge. So there's some controversy there. Wielded immense power in helping to set technical standards, particularly in the area of domain names. Worked behind the scenes, shunning publicity, and never made a fortune from his pioneering position. Jon could have been a millionaire. It just wasn't in his bag. He was not elected in any position of responsibility he held in the internet community. He was simply, in the words of the White House's internet policy advisor, the guy they trust. Most powerful person on the net. He really was the most powerful person on the net. He came by that power legitimately as the only person who could command the respect and loyalty of the whole community. And so this is it. He began working on what became the internet in 1969. As a 25-year-old graduate student at UCLA, he went on to edit the request for comment, which became the internet's technical standards. And here's his domain name dispute. Touched off a debate over how names for websites and other internet sources are distributed. This is ICANN. This is what he was disputing about. At present, if you want to create a website in the .com, .net domains, you have to register the name with an American company, Network Solutions, and pay a fee. That is what we've been talking about over the last 20 minutes. As the number of organizations going online has grown, disputes have arisen over ownership of those names, and Network Solutions' monopoly has been attacked. So in other words, they were not doing a very good job. Mr. Postel suggested an alternative, and his plan inevitably came under fire from competitors. He said it's not appropriate for a single individual. Oh, no, this guy says it's not appropriate for a single individual like Dr. Postel to make those policy decisions. A Network Solutions executive said earlier this year, so they fired back. Among his responsibilities was assigning all the numbers that go with the internet names through the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, which he formed and heads. Then he took control. He used his power to transfer control temporarily away from Network Solutions to his own server. No disruption was caused. He says, I'm not on any power trip. He said he was motivated solely by public good, and the decisions on domain naming have to be made fairly and with the long-term benefit of the internet community in mind. This philosophy and his contributions will play a critical role in shaping the future of the internet for years to come. A little bit more on the life of Jon Postel. Now, here's another picture of him. This was a 10-year tribute. And it just talks about more of the same thing. And maybe what we'll do is pop in the chat, and I may drop the link to this hangout to include you guys in this conversation. But I believe that, in fact, the above internet addresses reflects the below home addresses. And all of this is linked in together. That's why they have mailer demons, right? Because it's the mail. And that's why they had America Online, which was shaped like a pyramid. And that's why it said, you've got mail.